Hey there, this is That News You Care About, a weekly video game news show from the folks over at That Nerdy Site. Today is Monday, June 15th, 2020, and I'm one of your hosts, Logan Wilkinson. Joining me this week is my Phoenix son, Trevor Starkey.
Hello, hello.
And we're still working on Cameron Abbott's intro, I think.
He's at the New York
Sacrificial
Lamb.
The Sacrificial Lamb, that's right!
I was about to say, what do you mean? I thought we settled on it. The
Sacrificial Lamb, Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cam?
I'm good. I was going to come up with something like having...
Yeah, I heard the pause, the pregnant pause there, yeah.
Because I was thinking, do I do like the sound of like what I imagine a lamb sounds like when it's being sacrificed? And it's like, and then the decision was that, no, you shouldn't do that. And so I didn't.
It's just, like, all it is a bah, but you cut yourself off. Like, bah.
It's more like a, ah!
That'll do it too, I guess.
Yeah, the last time Cameron was on, it was when he made predictions history and became the first person to ever get negative points in a prediction. Still didn't get
accurate.
Last place. It was really funny, actually. Renee hit me up today and was like, so how'd the predictions break out? Like, I just hope I didn't get last. And I was like, buddy, I got bad news for you. I did at least be like, yo, at least you didn't get negative points like Cam. And then he was like, oh, I didn't get last. And it's like, oh, no, but he still got actual points, too, though. So he broke a little positive. And, yeah, it was the bearer of bad news. But, yes. Trevor, I believe.
I almost got third place or whatever it was, the next place up.
Yeah. Trev won, right? You beat Frank.
No, Frank won.
Frank won.
Because Frank's predictions weren't as...
Frank by far had the tamest predictions.
Yeah, his were basically like, this will happen. And so it was like, well, it happened, so he gets the full point.
He gets the full point, yeah. Very black and white.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But
we say that like they weren't audacious or like whatnot, but I mean, he had the most realistic predictions.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the fun in that, though?
Exactly.
But we are not.
Well, apparently
talking
you
about
can't have too much. You can't have too much fun because otherwise you get negative points.
Yeah, that's very true.
But were they fun or were they Mark Cerny murdering a man on stage and quoting Indiana Jones? You mean that's the problem here? You know what I mean?
To be fair, Shuhei Yoshida was an accomplice in the murder in that case.
That's true. I forgot about that. You might get negative too. Then you might have actually gotten last.
No, because it was still the one same prediction. I got negative point overall for it.
But we are not talking about predictions. We are talking about the Spider-Man over here today. After the perhaps too long and intriguing decision to open the PS5 reveal event with tons of GTA 5 info.
You really hated that GTA.
That Cameron Abbott liked, and I did not enjoy as much as all we're saying. The camera cut to black and slowly debuted a new trailer for a brand new Spider-Man game that was starring Miles Morales. The news became one of the biggest reveals of the entire PS5 reveal event, and had seemingly the entire games industry abuzz about this new, much-anticipated follow-up to Spider-Man. And then it was revealed it wasn't an actual game. It was DLC. Or was it? The confusing and muddled rollout of the PR side of this due to the interviews by Sony higher-ups seemed to cause its own mini-controversy over the game and whether it even was a game. So, what went wrong? Where do we stand today? And what do we think of the larger industry reaction conversation around Miles Morales' Spider-Man standalone, not DLC, full-fledged game, not full-fledged game reveal? We'll go with you first, Trev.
I mean, so much of this felt like a non-story as it was happening.
It was really bizarre to watch it happen live.
Yeah,
was I the only one who felt that?
We talked about it at length in our predictions episode that we figured it was probably a standalone title akin to Lost Legacy or Infamous First Light kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Hey, they're gonna build off of the base game that was there, but it's gonna be a side story with a new character, probably like not a full Spider-Man 2 sequel. So much as a side story, a la the aforementioned examples. Mm-hmm. And then, somebody at somebody at the Telegraph basically got a hold of the executive vice president head of European business at Sony at SIE.
What
Sony
a title,
Interactive
by the way!
Entertainment. Yeah, Simon Rutter, who said something to the effect of, "Oh, I guess it could be an expansion and an enhancement to the previous game." There's a substantial Miles Morales component, which is the expansion element, but also within the game as well, there's been major enhancements to the game and the game engine, obviously deploying some of the major PlayStation 5 technology and features. So like that got spun off, and people were like, "Oh my God, it's not a standalone game. It's expansion. It's DLC. Blah blah blah." And I was like, "Okay, I hardly think the head of European business at SIE." The executive vice president, head of European business at SIE, is like super in the weeds on what Insomniac is doing,
yeah.
and what this really is. So like, when that came out, I was like, I think this is being blown out of proportion. I think we're gonna see in a day or two. And sure enough, we saw in a day or two, basically Insomniac come out and say, no, it is a full standalone game. We will have more information soon. So yeah, it just like we see this often where somebody, like an executive person, speaks not knowing all the details, not knowing the facts, and goes off a little, outside of the marketing, machine, and it picks up crazy traction because it's, in this case, an executive vice president, so he should know theoretically. It's like that's not how a company like Sony works. Yeah. Like I mean, in a company like my own that are like, there are 30 of us maybe running the organization right now. I have no idea what most of my coworkers are doing on any given day, so I'm not going to go out there and speak on behalf of them, let alone kind of a giant company like Sony with multiple studios at work. So it's I don't know why he took the like. My takeaway is Simon Rudder needs some PR training from the PR team at Sony to basically say, hey, don't pick up the phone when they call you about this stuff. Like, direct it to us.
Well, that's the irony, right? Is that everybody hates things being like overly like spun and like PR heavy, and it's like, this is what happens when you don't have a PR person right next to the person. He just picks up the phone basically and just starts saying shit, and it's like, he doesn't have any this like. Even you reading like the quote that he gave was like, that is a nonsensical paragraph that he just said. Mm-hmm. None of it made any sense. And it's like, it's very clear that like he had no idea, but like you got to quote it from the executive vice president. You got to run it basically. And it's like, it is just like, this is why people have PR people right next to him. And this is why they have like PR companies whose job it is just to handle this kind of role in marketing. Like, it's because when you don't, it can get messy and cause its own 48-hour like Twitter controversy kind of thing. Cam, what did you think?
Like, talk just so much about a non-story. I think one of the reasons why people were so excited about it is it's a really big coincidence and a very, I think, fortuitous one that one of the first things we're seeing from the Sony press conference was like a game featuring a very famous, very popular young person, like character who's a young person of color. Especially considering like the political climate that's going on right now. So I think that was, the feeling I got from people on Twitter was they felt like this was a much needed win. In a way that like I don't think anybody was really expecting. I was actually kind of like not totally like for it because, to be honest, like as much as I love the characters of Miles Morales, the one in Spider-Man the game is not my favorite interpretation of his character. And I think that it's a really important thing to note. Like, people were like harping on it back in the day, but I think it's even more prevalent now. Like, Spider-Man is a bit weird of a game in like how close Spider-Man works with the police, the NYPD in that game. And like, how does that like? My curiosity for this game is really going to be coming from the back end of in the post 2020 Black Lives Matter movement that we've seen. What is Miles Morales' relationship with cops going to be in this game that's coming out in 6 months? I'm curious about that. One thing I will say though is that as far as like from that aspect, I'm very interested in like how people felt about it and what people thought about it. As far as like the state of the game, whether it's DLC, whether it's its own campaign, whether it's like a Lost Legacy launch release, very much a non-story to me. I think that the content will be what it's going to be. I trust Insomniac to build, at least when it comes to the mechanics of the game, to make it interesting, especially with Miles's like unique power set among the Spider-Men / women. in like the multiverse in Marvel's canon. So I'm really curious to see how he's going to play. Like, not curious. I'm very excited to play as him with his tool set. Uh, as far as like how how it plays into the game itself, I'm curious, and I'm excited. But also Trevor and Frank both got me super hyped because they're gonna put it into the Spider-Verse outfit, which is like with the like just the full-on Spider-Verse outfit for Miles with the Jordans and everything are just gonna be sick. Turn down the very dramatic like booming orchestra soundtrack and turn on this Into the Spider-Verse soundtrack and just sling around New York is just gonna be sick.
But like, I mean, you brought up an interesting point too. Now to really think about games, that like how different in terms of the like Spider-Man's connection to the police do you think this game is actually going to be compared to what the main game was, right? Like, I mean, like this game.
I
like,
hope it's different.
Yeah, but like, do you think it actually is, right? Because like these games are made before this really happened. Like they'd have to. I mean, potentially if they just kind of basically like put it where like it's a bit of a different relationship. Like they heard some of the feedback, obviously, but like he's still going to work with the police in this game. He's still going to do these kind of things. I would assume. Like I would imagine it's a little bit better, but like this game was mostly made, I would assume, by the time Black Lives Matter really started picking up again in 2020.
Yeah, and here's the thing that might hurt it. If it's tone deaf to, because here's the interesting point. Miles is multicultural. He's he's black and he's Puerto Rican, but his dad is also a cop. Like in all like the Miles Morales storytelling, his dad's a police officer, and so his dad being a black cop, his dad being dead in the Spider-Man game universe, like that's a big thing. Is that like so like Miles already had a unique relationship with law enforcement in that he's the son of a cop, but he's also a young man of color, and now he's a vigilante of color. And like, how is his and here's the thing: it might come out, they might retain the same level of buddy camaraderie with the New York Police Department, and it might not go over well. Like that's a reality we have to kind of be prepared for. Like it might not be great to I'll be honest, I really don't want to go back to play Spider-Man. Because I don't want to help out the NYPD right now,
Yeah, I mean, so I remember that coming up. There were a few vocal advocates or vocal opponents to that aspect of the game. Like when it first came out, I remember seeing that, and like obviously very different time frame. But I remember thinking at the time, like, yeah, but it's a fictional experience. So like the NYPD in this game is not the NYPD in our real world. Because it's the Marvel universe and all that stuff. Obviously, yeah, you can't completely disassociate the two. And I definitely don't think they will have had the opportunity to adjust to current events in between that. But at the same time, it's completely within the realm of possibility that they already kind of accounted for that based on either the feedback or based on just recognizing, societal differences
Miles
between Peter Parker and Miles there. And if they don't do it for this, I would almost guarantee it'll be a factor in Spider-Man 2. In a way, I don't know if either of you watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but there was an episode in one of their early seasons where Terry Crews, who is like a sergeant in that show. Now he's, I think, a lieutenant, but at the time he was a sergeant, Sergeant Jeffords, and he basically gets profiled by a cop in his neighborhood or something like that, and they turned it into a whole arc, and it's because in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, he's a very powerful black character, as well as the Captain Raymond Holt. And they have, real like conversations about the frustrations of having to kind of walk that line, and the injustices, and how they're trying to be better and rise above it and affect change from within, kind of thing. It doesn't jive with the all cops are bastards kind of talking points these days and everything, but I remember like that being like a profoundly impactful episode for me in that series, which I very much enjoy. So I could very much see Insomniac kind of exploring a similar theme of like Miles being reticent because his father was a cop, but his father also died in the line of duty, and so that's gonna cause a whole other set of distrust and issues with the police, perhaps. And then just he's not blind to the world around him. If Marvel cops are as bad as real life cops, he could certainly be adjusting for that. So, but I don't know how much of that we'll see in this instance of the game. But I definitely think they could. They'll be taking notes for what's going on right now, and really try and retool how the relationship with the NYPD in the sequel, the next adventure for Peter, I guess.
I mean that's what I think more too, is that this game, I think to a large degree, is already kind of done. And I mean, like, again, they'll make tweaks and they'll do different, and like Miles is different than Peter, and like surely they'll be aware of that distinction. But I think we'll see much more change in like the actual Spider-Man 2 and Peter's interactions with the NYPD there, and just the police in general, right? And it's interesting too. Like, it's for me, as somebody who didn't finish like Spider-Man when it came out, maybe got like a third of the way through. I feel like I missed kind of a lot of what like the larger conversation on like Spider Cop, quote unquote, was, because I was still like building up into it. And so I'll be curious.
Spider Cop was like a hard-boiled detective like joke that Peter Parker made whenever he was dealing with his police liaison.
Yeah, and so like I'm curious to see. I'm curious to just play the whole game and like see if I get what they're kind of going at in terms of like the criticism there more, and then B, how they evolve that both in this Lost Legacy-esque piece of kind of like storytelling, and then also in the actual sequel to Spider-Man as well. But that's pretty much what I'll say. The controversy was wrapped up within, again, 48 hours. But those 48 hours, like a few different things this past week, were a hell of a thing to be in. But now, if anybody doesn't have any further comments and questions, we're on to the next story. We're bopping along here. All about the PlayStation 5 still. Spoiler, it's going to be a topic of conversation for a while, probably. Gaming Twitter is abuzz right now. Not with news about The Last of Us Part 2. We're tired of that discourse. But instead about the PlayStation 5's pricing. Covering a price range between hundreds of dollars right now, it seems. It is basically the clearest indication so far that nobody has any idea what they're talking about in terms of how much the PlayStation 5 is going to cost. I've seen some wild numbers out there. So what do we think the price of the PS5 is going to be, boys? And even more importantly, what do we think the price will do for the market for this gen's console sales and the overall gaming market as a whole? Is $600 really possible? Is $400 too low? Either way, how big of an impact can the price of the console play in the larger back and forth between PlayStation and Xbox for the flow of this new gen that is dawning right before us? Also, just want to say before we continue, I saw a price that was $750 earlier on Twitter. People are wiling out here on the price of the PlayStation 5. Cameron, how much do you think the PS5 is going to cost, and do you think how much you think it will matter in the overall console wars?
Well, I mean, it's tough because
we'll say with the disc first off, and then you can go digital edition.
Well, let me put it this way: to address that last part that you mentioned, the three big gaming companies have now transitioned into completely different business models when it comes down.
It's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's because they've basically, Nintendo realizes their games aren't about the power behind the console. The Wii and definitely proved it being the weakest of its generation, that despite that, it can provide a unique gaming experience that people can't find anywhere else, and they've doubled down on that incredibly hard with the Switch. making like one of my favorite consoles in ever. And additionally, like my brother-in-law and sister just got Switches, and it's become this awesome thing in my family right now, especially during a time when the kids are stuck inside because it's too hot to let them go outside to play. Like it was 102 just like 2 hours ago. So, welcome to Phoenix. But like it's been this awesome thing where like they've been exposed to Animal Crossing now, and they love Animal Crossing. They all have their little Animal Crossing person. They stay on my sister's island as like the sub people, so it's like who would ever want to do that weird like multiplayer way of playing this game? It's like, well, it actually works well if you have kids. Mm-hmm. My nephew he's always been obsessed with Mario. He's beaten multiple Mario games on like the DS and 3DS. And now he's working his way through the the new Super Mario Brothers or whatever that version is for the Switch. He's working his way through that. My brother-in-law has just like destroyed and devoured Pokemon Shield. So like there's awesome stuff going on with the Switch that is totally different from where the other two consoles were going. And now that we've seen the announcements for both consoles, the Xbox Series X or whatever their next the Scarlet is basically going to be designed to be a basic entry into the Microsoft ecosystem, and for all intents and purposes it's a controller-led PC. Like that's what it is. It's a like restricted low-end PC. I say low-end as far as like the entry level for it is lower end. You don't need to have all the peripherals and whatnot that you'd need for an actual PC. But the idea that it's just a singular black box that will play the games that you want to play, and will be connected to an entire massive Xbox Live ecosystem, and will be totally backwards compatible with majority of games that have ever come out on any Xbox console. Like, it's basically making the argument that we know that we're in a net zero game right now when it comes to quote unquote technology. It's not about who puts out the most powerful processor or the most powerful hardware anymore. It's about the ecosystem and the online communities that you're a part of. Where is that important? And they've doubled down on it with the Xbox Scarlet, Series X, etc. To the point where like they've done full integration into PC. That was a big movement they made that Phil Spencer actually like spearheaded. I remember I was still working at like the Aware Under the Public Adjusting company that I was working for at the time. When during the E3 announcement came out, and people were like, "Whoa, that was such a weird thing. Like, why did you say that?" And it's like people don't understand. Like, I now get to play like games with like Snowbike Mike and other people from my PC while they're playing on Xbox One. That is such a crazy idea, and not just like not just Rocket League, but like we're talking like Modern Warfare Warzone is a game that's 100% crossplay across every platform. You have that with just so much going on, but that really started being a push from Microsoft back then, and so that's their approach now. PlayStation's approach is, this is the hardware, this is the game series that like the games that are going to be coming out that are most of them are going to be exclusive to Sony. They're still taking their approach of like the walled garden approach. However, it's nice to see that they have laxed that with crossover and crossplay. For as much as I will always rag on Fortnite, I will always be grateful that Fortnite was one of those games that kind of tore down the Iron Curtain between consoles. And so we're like, it's interesting. I'm super curious because they've all gone in these different directions. And they're like, to say they're competitors may not be entirely accurate anymore.
So to answer your question, Logan, I'm going to say $4.99.
Thank you.
Oh shoot, I'm so sorry.
I forgot into the actual question I had asked him.
So for the standard one, $4.99. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to say $4.99. I don't know if that's going to be the disc or the discless version. And
I think that's with disc version. Personally,
I josh on you, Cameron, because
because
I appreciate the breakdown in methodologies across the companies, but yeah,
I actually totally forgot about the first part of the question. I'm so sorry.
No, you're totally fine.
So yeah, I have a couple things that I want to highlight in terms of like why I think $4.99 makes sense. So there was that report in February from Bloomberg. Takashi Mochizuki reported that scarce components have pushed the manufacturing cost for Sony's next PlayStation to around $450 per unit, forcing a difficult price-setting decision in its battle with Microsoft, according to people with knowledge of the matter. So right there, like anything below $450, unlikely, especially because Sony doesn't tend to sell their systems at a loss, even though they can, and they'll make up a ton of money off of the software sales. They still they like going to their stakeholders and saying like, we're making X number of dollars off of every unit we're selling already right out the gate, and then they just make more and more money off of the software sales. So $450, that's the baseline of the cost, so that's probably not even factoring in distribution, all the extra costs that are going to come
marketing,
out of that.
Yeah. Marketing.
So $4.99 seems like it's probably as low as they'll go. So I could see that being the discless version, and then maybe $4 or $5.49 for the disc version. I agree with you in the sentiment you kind of raised in our in the prediction results episode and the reaction episode last week, Logan, of like they would seemingly be unlikely to go as high as $5.99 again, just because of the messaging of the PS3. However, like some of the things that one of the things I looked up, for example, is that so that was 2006 is when PS3 launched at $4.99 or $5.99, and inflation-wise, that would come to, in 2020 dollars, $635 for the $4.99 model, or $762 for the $5.99 model. So even if they did come out and say like, "Hey, we're doing it $5.99," I think they would have significantly better messaging around it. But also, some of the spin might be around, "Hey, like this is still a cheaper console than our past iterations, given inflation and all that stuff." Not much, but it's still definitely a hard sell. But I also see them. The other article I want to bring up is I very much see them more willing to take a loss on the hardware, because if you recall, April of last year, April of 2019. The beginning of their fiscal year last year, I guess, they discontinued selling digital versions of their games to third-party retailers. So, like GameStop stopped getting codes from PlayStation. Walmart, Best Buy, all of them, none of them can sell digital codes anymore. So PlayStation is the only place you can get digital codes for PlayStation games. And so if they can sell you the discless version, the only way you can buy games for that is going to be through PlayStation. They're not having to deal with any middlemen for that at that point. So they're going to make more money off of every game they sell, as well as those games can't be resold, and they completely take out the kind of resale market of GameStop. So, like, even if they sell that system at a loss, they're going to be making an extra 20 to 30% on every game they sell to owners of those consoles, that they would not have made having to go through third parties. So I think that's like they put a year ago, they kind of put things in place for them to really be able to capitalize on a digital future. And I think that's going to kind of come home to roost for them a little bit here.
I mean, so you took one of my points, which was, that kind of GameStop Walmart decision, kind of allowing them a bit more leeway in the pricing of it, I think, in terms of how much you're going to get on the back end. But also, to me, part of why I just think 600 is unlikely is, I just think 600, again, I think there is just like a mental hang up like after you kind of go past like 500, like it just seems like a whole another leap to go to the next kind of round number there. But even more than that is, part of me thinks they understand the psychological effect of Microsoft undercutting them, right? Like, I don't know how much Microsoft console is going to be, but I mean, theoretically, if Microsoft comes out and says, here's our console at $400, and then PlayStation were to be like, and here's ours at $600, I mean, that is a $200. I mean, like, that is a sizable amount difference, right? Because, like,
yeah,
when
the $100 killed
right,
Xbox right out the gate.
And we're
this
literally
generation.
would be doubling it, right? And like, assuming they both came out at the same time, they're both going to come out this fall, and a $200 difference is like, I think we're in a game a little bit like the beginning of this gen, where they're kind of each in a game of chicken of like who's going to blink first on the price. And I just think, even if Sony was like, I mean, even if this thing was like it costs $550 to make, which it doesn't, based on some of the reports we've said, again, like they're kind of pegging it more like around $450. I still don't think they would do. I still think they would just be like, we just can't risk them coming out and being like, it's gonna be $400 and ours is gonna be $200 more, right? Like, I think pretty much no matter what, like I think the highest they'll go is 500. And like I'm kind of the mind that they'll maybe do 500, and then the digital edition will be $50 to $100 cheaper, right? Like either $450 or $400. I think like wildest best case scenario dreams, right, is that like they come out and say, here's PlayStation 5, it is $400, the digital edition is $300 or $350. I think that's unlikely, but I just think I don't know, like I think Sony is smart enough to understand the optics of it, right? Like I think they could sell this console for $600 and people would buy it, and like they could figure out like a marketing strategy that'd be like, okay. I just feel like there's no reason for them to do, like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, I just think they're smarter than that right now. Like, I think so often, like, the story of PlayStation is like they have a great generation and then grow like overconfident the next one and then come crashing back down like this whole roller coaster ride. And like, I just think over time, after doing this for like 25 years virtually, and this will be in their 5th console, like I think you learn some lessons, and like you learn to not make the same mistake over again if you don't need to, right? And like I just think there's not really a need to, right? Like I think if they said 500 and Microsoft says 400, Sony will say sure, but you can get the digital edition for, you know, this much, like, too.
450,
and,
yeah.
Yeah, like they have kind of an out with that, right? But like I don't think they want, like, they have no reason to want any sort of bad publicity, right? Like, they have no reason to want to have to defend the price of the console right out of the gate by saying it's this exorbitant amount of money, right? And I'm more of the mind, too, that I just think for the PS5 and for the Xbox One, right, like, I think they each are just going to kind of be around, like, that $400 to $500 range. And I do, like, it's like that dumb thing of, like, why everything is like $1.99 and not $2. Like, I just think that we have like as a society like weird mental hangups and like numbers we like and don't like, and like I think we've collectively decided that to some degree, at the very least, that like $600 is too much for a video game console, right? And like part of what I said on last week's episode 2 was the fact of like I don't think they were ever really going to do $600. But I think, again, coming out and being like, yo, this is how much the console costs. It's $600 in the midst of a global worldwide pandemic that has had the most dire economic effects since the Great Depression is just a bad look. Like, I just don't think there's any real good way to sell that. It's like, and to be fair, like, they kind of got screwed with the PS3 a little bit, where it's like, this is how much this machine costs, and then, like, the next year we're going to have a recession. And it's like, you can't plan for it that much, but, like, this one, you have some foresight here. It's like, oh, we can see things are a bit topsy-turvy here. Let's maybe look at the price and make sure it's not something absolutely outrageous. Because, like, I think $600 in general is a lot, but I think $600 right now is just kind of even more of a lot. Like, you could already make the case that, like, buying a new video game console in the conditions we're at right now in the world is already kind of an extravagance that is maybe not needed at the moment. But, like, let alone one that is even more of a hard pitch to kind of parents or just people in their 20s or 30s or whatever it might be. Like, $600 is $600, and I don't know if people are going to kind of have the stomach for it at this moment.
So I'm
I mean,
curious.
I was just gonna say I need to clarify. I agreed with Trevor. I actually meant to say I believe it'll be $4.99 for the disc version, and it'll be either 400 or 450 for the discless version.
Yeah,
That's my solid standing point. I think that
that's kind of where I'm at.
$600 for like during a like global recession, during a global pandemic with depression levels of unemployment worldwide, like is just it's not about optics, it's about reality. You like they can't be the company that comes out and say, "Well, we know you'll get a second job to buy this."
Yeah. So the thing I'm curious about is one of the things that we've seen in the time since the 499 599 PS3 launch is the advent of the always upgrading Apple and iPhones and iPads and all that stuff. Like that stuff launched in 2008, a couple years after PS3, and drastically, I think, changed the technology marketplace. So you have people, and admittedly, it's definitely not like apples to apples and all that stuff, and I recognize that. But you have people willing to pay. Like I was just looking, like iPads are like the latest iPads and iPad Pros are going for like $1,000 ish and that kind of stuff. Now, like today, and so like I think there is potential that like the narrative just gets shifted to this is a premium product. Like you're paying a premium product. Why does Apple get away with charging those kinds of prices for doing minimal upgrades every 2 years or something like that, and people buy them every 2 years? You have your Tim Gettys, and admittedly there aren't a ton of those people, probably the early adopters and the constantly upgrading people, but the thing that could exist here is what if like PlayStation introduces like a payment plan of like, hey, it's $600, but we're gonna set you up on a $50 a month payment plan or something like that. You don't have to pay it all at once, but whatever the case may be, whatever that like business model that they try and tackle could be. That's I
that's
think
an interesting argument.
I mean, I think there's potential out there if that was what they came down and said, hey, this is how much we need to make on this thing to make it work. How do we make that happen? Recognizing that the world is in a weird place right now. And I think they even I want to say they already have kind of like financing programs, but I think both PlayStation and Xbox have financing options on a lot of their systems if you buy like directly through their sites or something like that. But don't quote me on that because I haven't really delved into it. But I remember like I've heard it come up in conversations before, and then people have been like, no, they already do that. So.
Well, my whole thing in response to that would be there's two parts of it that I'm interested in delving further into. It is one, we're talking about one is the standard of the Apple product and the history of Apple products in general, which is somebody who used to sell them. I know that the entire approach to Apple was a premium experience for a luxury price. That's always kind of been their prerogative. Outside of like the Tim Cook era, let's make $50 iPhones that are candy color coded. So that's kind of been the philosophy. And then so like these higher end products, like $1,000 for an iPad, yeah, but to get the most premium iPad even before this latest generation still would have rounded you up like $850, $900 after taxes. It's existed as a premium luxury product with lower end models. Because, yeah, sure, maybe you're not the person who upgrades to the newest one every year, but you're the person who upgrades to the one a generation behind that or two generations behind that. Nick Scarpino famously, from Kind of Funny, had an iPhone 5 for years and refused to upgrade it because he was happy and satisfied with it. Like the curmudgeon old fogey that he is.
Yeah, I mean, like we already saw this generation. We've seen like both PlayStation and Xbox kind of embrace that like half upgrade model of like that you see with like the iPhone and the iPhone S or something like that with the Xbox Series X and or Xbox One's X, sorry, and the PS4 Pro that kind of helped elongate this generation a little bit before the full-fledged next gen.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons they decided to do that was one, it'll drive down the cost of the next gen. From what at the time, I mean, when PS4 Pro was announced, the technology that they're talking about needing in the PS5 right now, the one that's costing them $450 for just the cost of it, was much more at the time. Especially considering the fact that it was during the big Bitcoin mining craze that drove up cost of like GPUs to just extravagant prices that are just absolutely ridiculous. But thankfully we're somewhat past that now. But to the point of it also, so there's one culture. One is the culture of Apple, like what you expect from an Apple product, what you expect from Apple pricing. And the other side of that, I would also say, is it's different verticals between an entertainment console system and cell phones. Cell phones have always, like, the latest technology for cell phones, whether it was like car phones in the 80s, the big brick phones in the 80s, going into the 90s, and like all this stuff, is that like cell phones have always been, until like probably the last 10 years, very expensive, actually probably the last 20 years, with the Razr being the first like low-end model. The approachable model.
I mean, but like at the same time as like, because I remember selling the Razr phone, the Motorola Razr phone for Singular. At the same time, I was selling Nextel, text to talk, walkie-talkie type phones and stuff. Like yeah, there was the premium model, and that was what, $300 with contract is what I remember selling that for. But that was still like without contract, it was crazy more, and so. That's why I bring up, and I also had specifically brought up like the iPods, the iPad model, because I look at those outside of cell phones as well. But like, that's where, hey, yeah, they've moved away from it now, but the whole like the cell phone industry thrived for years on, hey, we're gonna bury the cost of the thing that you're buying in large monthly payments for your plan as well. So they could theoretically take that same model.
I mean, they could, but like that's also adding an entirely like. Here's the thing: if we're talking about retailers, that's forcing retailers to essentially adopt a. Well, I guess the guys who run the cell phone part of the electronics booth at Walmart are going to be getting an upgrade as far as their considering like their job aspect would at that point. For like knowing different plans and rates and stuff would probably be excelling at that point to cover consoles, but outside of that, like
admittedly, I don't think they'll actually do this. It's just kind of a food for thought of like, hey, if they need to lessen the blow of, hey, this thing's going to cost $600 or more, here's how they could theoretically do it.
But also, I would mention that, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the PS4 was sold at a loss, wasn't it?
I don't think so.
Wasn't that a big point of it? Was that it was sold at cost or at loss?
No, I want to say because the PS4 launched at $400, $399, and I want to say from the jump they said like they only cost us like $370 something or something like that. So they were making money off of every console sold, if I recall correctly. And admittedly, like the reason Xbox didn't is because they included the Kinect as a pack-in, whereas like PlayStation, if you wanted like the PlayStation Eye camera or whatever, you had to buy the camera separate. And ultimately, like if you bought the same accessories that got you the Kinect type functionality, you were paying pretty much the same for both systems, but Xbox made the mistake of bundling it in as a requirement for the system that they, very quickly kind of backed away from.
Ran away from that one, yeah.
Well, yeah,
but the damage was already done at that point.
Yeah, the exodus of who the head of Xbox at that time, like, they chased him out with pitchforks and torches. But I will say that I was exploring
to be fair, that whole rollout was bad. It wasn't just the price point.
Yeah. I will say to that thought, Trevor, that you had where you were giving food for thought. I was exploring that food for thought because I also don't think they'll do that. I was trying to think of like the actual logistics of if you wanted to implement it. But back to the point, though, I think different cell phone culture and Apple culture are so vastly different from console culture. Because here's the thing. They've sold a $600 console before, and it was a year before the global recession in 2008 that ended up tanking
2 years before.
Sorry, 2 years. And
but that's the same time that Apple was like taking off with iPhones.
Yeah, but I mean but that also is the approach. Like a cell phone, even back then, like a cell phone was considered like you said, you were selling singular phones, like phones, like through that process. I remember my parents like always like bitching and complaining
I meant the brand.
about.
I meant the brand singular.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I meant that too.
Okay.
Sorry if my phrasing meant it sounded like I was talking about like you were exclusively selling one kind of phone.
Yeah.
No,
Like back
oh God.
after, because what it was AT&T, and then Singular bought AT&T, and then eventually AT&T basically took their name back.
Yeah, like so. Yeah, no, Singular bought AT&T, but then like rebranded themselves as AT&T. And then they bought who was the like my parents were using a different brand. It was like Orange whatever, something like that. Like
I mean, that was Singular. Was their whole thing was they were the orange ones.
okay,
Anyway,
yeah, then my parents
that's
were
a
using Singular.
we don't need to
Fine.
delve like too
Sorry,
deep
yeah,
into
that-
into
yeah,
We got a
cell
little
phone-
off.
but
Yeah.
but I would
but
say
yeah,
that like
it's-
the lines between cell phone culture and console culture are blurring as we saw this generation, in that console culture is adapting some of the things we've seen that cell phone culture embrace. And the way I would envision this working out, if they were to actually do it, would be, hey, yeah, you could go to Walmart or Best Buy and buy it for $600, or you can finance it directly through PlayStation.com/store, and that's how they'll alleviate it. And then again, they're lessening the amount they're having to pay to third-party retailers for the distribution channel by keeping it in-house and really trying to reinforce their own storefront in the same way that Apple does.
No, it's fair. I think
Ultimately,
that's
we all think it's going to be $500, and that they won't be
$499.
$600. Yeah,
$499 because of psychological reasons.
$499 because of psychological reasons. Yeah, it's a good conversation. Trevor brought up a good point, but
that was fun to explore that.
that's the end of the show. We got some shout-outs. I am shouting out PlayStation 5's reveal was all about continuity by Rob Fahey over at GameIndustry.biz. I really liked the article just because it kind of explores almost like a mini history of like PlayStation, like the kind of touchstones that the PS5 is kind of connecting it to, and kind of continuing the legacy of PlayStation. It's a real fun, quick read opinion piece on GameIndustry.biz. Trevor, I'm assuming,
Yep.
I may be wrong. Yeah, I assumed. Has a shout out as well. What do you got, Trev?
Yeah, so I pulled in. I imagine all of us at least have seen the video of Steve Saylor.
Yes.
Kind of, he recorded himself booting up The Last of Us Part 2 for the first time, and you very much see kind of his visceral, very emotional response to seeing the wide array of accessibility options that game is touting.
I'll be honest, I started watching that video before I read any explanation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just like what's like is it a really sad beginning? Like what's he, and then he gets to the point where he's talking about accessibility. I was like, oh my heart, like, oh
Yeah.
Steve,
So,
like you sweet man, you.
Yeah. So in addition to that, so I'll link his tweet and his video response to in the show notes as well. But in addition to that, he and somebody else who I don't have their name off the top of my head, but did a discussion for the website Can I Play That, talking about kind of their impressions of The Last of Us Part 2's accessibility, and he kind of talks about that. Full disclosure, he got brought in by Naughty Dog to do a little bit of consulting work for them on accessibility, but they kind of talk about it as like the most accessible game ever made, and the breadth of things that even they haven't like explored, all the ins and outs of and stuff. So
it's got like 60 different accessibility options. I think I read somewhere, right?
Yeah, it's definitely something that PlayStation and Naughty Dog themselves have been touting, and they they did a whole a whole blog post about like, here's everything you can do, and as an able gamer myself, it's probably there's probably a lot there that I won't need or won't be playing around with, but like as somebody who loves having the subtitles up there just because my many years as a drummer in high school and whatnot have taken their toll on my ears over the years. I like having the option to read along as I'm playing or something like that. So I love that even that they have kind of sliders in terms of scale, I believe, and that you can play around with, and you can customize how name is displayed, so you can see that in a certain color versus just a straight white or something like that. So just a lot of customization. And the one of the things they kind of highlight in the accessibility impressions kind of conversation that we're including as a shout out is the game has basically like some default helpful modes for like are you a blind gamer, are you a deaf gamer, are you a mobility assisted gamer or something like that, and basically you can pick any of those options, and it'll kind of give you here's some recommended defaults that we've got, but you can still go in and kind of customize anything to your heart's content that they have. So I just wanted to give that a shout out because yay for accessibility, and games should be as accessible to as many people as possible.
I'll also just take any time to shout Steve out. He's absolutely one of the best guys out there.
Yeah.
But that's the show. Thank you for listening.
Didn't quite get us into under 45 minutes.
I know.
Like
I was looking at that. I was
for
like, ooh. But yes, if you like what you heard, you can go support us over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, like all of our wonderful patrons have. Their support has helped so many of the shows come alive, including this one, alongside other ones whose names I am not going to say right now. But just other ones. That anime pod. But yes, you can go over to patreon.com.
You pick the one.
I know. I was the only one that came to my mind. That's all I suspended. Yeah. But but all of their wonderful support. We appreciate all of our patrons. And we couldn't do this without you guys. And even if you cannot go support us over at Patreon, your support nonetheless means the world to us. And we'd appreciate it if you could rate, review, like, subscribe, and share on all kinds of podcast services around the globe. Give us a 5-star rating. It really does help for new shows like this. But in general, we appreciate your support. We've been at this for like 8 months, 9 months now, 6 months, 7 months. Time is a circle, especially in a pandemic. But either
November,
way,
so yeah, like we're going
7 months.
7 months. Yeah, so 7.5 months.
We appreciate it nonetheless, and y'all are the best. Shout out to you, Brandon, again. You can find Trevor at Trevor J. Starkey over on the internet. Anything to plug, Trev?
Yeah, check out this week's That D Plus show with Cameron and I talking about Artemis Fowl, which, that is a movie. I don't recommend you actually watch the movie, but you can talk about, or you can listen to us kind of vent about the movie. And
I just might do
many,
that.
many problems.
You can find Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything to plug, Cam?
Sorry, I was having
PTSD flashbacks.
I was having flashbacks to Artemis Fowl. That's a movie. Maybe shouldn't be a movie, but it's a movie.
That's all Cameron's got. All right, Cameron's in shell shock over here. You can find myself at Lefty Logie on the internet. I will plug. I think I already did it last week, but I really enjoyed the conversation nonetheless. So I'm gonna also say you should go listen to a D Plus show. But it is two. It is one is me and Trevor talking about Haunted Mansion, because that movie it was a fun conversation really. So that was the back end of a doubleheader me and Trev did. And then I'm also gonna say go dig way deep. Go into the annals of the That D Plus show.
I don't think that's the right word.
That's not the right pronunciation of that word that you're trying to pronounce.
And go listen to myself, Frank, Cameron, and Christian.
Yep.
Talk about Brink.
And me, yeah.
And Trev, yes. I'll go talk about Brink, because that was a ton of fun to watch and record a podcast about. You can go follow That Nerdy Site at That Nerdy Site on the internet. And until next time, have a pleasant tomorrow. I think Trevor says that sometimes.
Nope, that's not right at all.